Today we're going to focus on the Marine Corps of the branches of service, and there's three reasons why we're doing this. The first is that the Marine Corps is the branch of service with which I am most familiar. Um, as the proud daughter of a Marine combat veteran, I was raised with a close awareness of the mythic force that the Marines have on individual members. The second reason is that this workshop is being hosted and built in collaboration with, hosted by and built in collaboration with two folks. Jeff Sterling at the Arcata Veterans Hall has given an unending amount of effort and time to helping to organize voices and giving us space to record a number of our videos, and he is himself a Marine. And Aaron Toole, whom we'll talk about today, is a UC Berkeley ceramicist and also a Marine. The third reason, which we'll look into today, is that of all of the branches of service, as we alluded to last time, it is the Marine Corps that is most explicit and intentional about this mythic element or the civil religion within the force. So that is why we are looking at the Marine Corps. We could, of course, look at any of the branches of service, but the Marine Corps affords us a particularly potent point of access. So here we are. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, has been the United States Marine Corps motto since 1883. It's lost no currency since then. It hasn't softened in any way to what many see as an increasingly secularized culture. Rankling advocates of religious freedom, public pluralism, and the First Amendment, the Corps continues to monitor and to provide resources to support the spiritual fitness of its members. And spiritual fitness is understood by the Corps to not only to promote, but to be an integral part of mission readiness. It has a pragmatic, this-worldly application. But Marine faithfulness isn't just this-worldly. With what we might be tempted wrongly, I'd say, to think is tongue-in-cheek, Marines close their hymn, and they do call it a hymn, with the assurance that if the Army and the Navy ever look on heaven's scenes, they will find the streets are guarded by United States Marines. The United States Marine Corps has built a world. It's developed a sacred cosmos. Becoming a Marine means becoming an active part of that cosmos and being committed to it. Among the branches of the U.S. Armed Forces, the Corps is uniquely explicit about the degree to which a sense of meaning, value, and purpose define membership. From the Corps' own website, Corporal Jeff Sorney says this: "I love the Marines for the intangible possessions that cannot be issued: pride, honor, integrity." Pride, honor, integrity, honor, courage, commitment, God, country, Corps. The intangibles are described in all kinds of ways. The faithfulness is unending, but the question, faithful to what, gets a range of responses. The two contemporary Marines I'll turn to in just a bit each give a different answer. Semper Fi, always faithful. And I ask, faithful to what? One says self, God, country, Corps. Another answers, Semper Fi means being faithful to one another, beyond the scope of the military, beyond being there for someone in combat. It has less to do with the institution and more to do with the individual. My own father used to say, God, country, Corps, and family. He added that one. The civil religion of the Corps is internally diverse, but it is enduringly unified at the same time. It's characterized as much by the exemplary, unquestioning service. Well, there's the Semper. This is the Marine Corps flag with Semper Fidelis highlighted, and the challenge coin, which we'll see more of in just a minute, that really exemplifies or makes explicit this enduring quality of the faith. And that enduringly unified faith is characterized as much by the exemplary, unquestioning service of Lieutenant General Chesty Puller as it is by the exemplary and deeply critical service of Major General Smedley Butler. These are two of the most highly decorated Marines in U.S. history. The first was an uncritical supporter of extending American empire. The second was not, and gave his post-war life to protest against that empire, which he saw as irredeemably corrupted by money and by greed. Both lived their lives dedicated to the values of the Corps: honor, courage, and commitment. And polarized though their positions on war, empire, and protest may be, You'd be hard-pressed to find a Marine today or any day who would be willing to cast aspersions on either one of these men. The Corps cultivates in Marines a deep and abiding loyalty to one's brothers and sisters in arms. In no person is that loyalty more fiercely represented than in Chesty Puller. Puller's status in the Corps is legendary. There is absolutely no doubt that Puller is the mythological hero of the Corps, the very icon of the entire institution, writes his most recent and comprehensive biographer. Young Marines today aspire to live into the model that Chesty provided. Having done all the pull-ups they can do, they do one more for Chesty. Puller's was a model of unending effort, of commitment to the task at hand beyond the perceived limits of the physical. But it was also equally a model of egalitarian commitment. And the stories abound. There's just so many of them. As an officer, Puller stood in the chow line with the enlisted men. He didn't eat until they were served. He carried his own pack. He slept on the same ground as everyone else. He never received medical treatment until all of the enlisted men were treated. He's renowned for making his troops do nothing that he wouldn't himself do, for asking them to do nothing that he wouldn't himself do. During Puller's 37 years of service, what his biographer calls 37 years of glory unparalleled in the history of the Corps, he earned 5 Navy Crosses. He's the only Marine ever to do so. And not one was earned for individual bravery. Each recognized the role he played in the larger collective operation in leading his unit to victory. And he would lead his unit anywhere. Puller sought war in whatever land. He was a soldier, and a soldier needed a war. He included casualty levels in every incident report, and he gauged a unit's success, the quality of their fighting, by those casualty levels. The higher, the better. Casualty levels indicated to him a kind of commitment. He had his critics. He was called, quote, a tragic caricature of Marine aggressiveness. But he was and he remains the Marine's Marine, part of the chain of memory that coheres the community. Tradition was something he prized. In a 1952 interview, he says of his recruits, "We try to teach them that it is a proud thing, a glorious thing, to fight as Marines have always fought, without counting the cost. And above all, we try to teach them there are some things worse than wounds or death." That there are some things worse than wounds or death is a truth built deeply into the living myths of American national identity. And this interview resonated with the public and, of course, with the Corps. Puller remains an inspiration for Marines who would serve with pride, honor, and integrity, and without counting the cost. Counting the cost does something to diminish the import of sacrifice. It renders service into something just a little bit mercenary. And in war, especially in wars of empire, counting the cost can lead pretty quickly to protest. Counting the cost and publicizing that accounting was the calling of Major General Smedley Butler. A full generation older than Puller, Butler began his Marine Corps career at age 17 in the unabashed land grab that was the Spanish-American War. And he ended that career following World War I. At the time of his death in 1940, Butler was the most highly decorated Marine in U.S. history. 16 medals, 5 for individual heroism. He earned the Medal of Honor twice for 2 separate events. His loyalty to the Corps and to the United States is unassailable. If his service didn't make that clear, his response to what's known as the business plot did. In 1933, a small group of very wealthy men wanted to overthrow the reform-minded government of FDR. They approached Butler, asked him to raise an army, march on Washington, take the capital, and prepare for their imposition of a fascist state. "If you get 500,000 soldiers advocating anything that smells like fascism," Butler replied, "I'll get 500,000 more and we'll lick the hell out of you and we'll have a real war right here at home." Butler was not a pacifist. Like Puller, he understood that there were things worse than wounds, worse than death. After his 1931 retirement from the Corps, he worked tirelessly to proclaim just what those worst things were. Worse than death is the betrayal of an ideal of honor, courage, and commitment, of freedom and democracy, of self-sacrifice for the greater good. Worse than death is the betrayal of that ideal and in the interest of money, profit. "War is a racket," he writes, opening a pamphlet of the same name. "It's possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one in which profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. You can find this in its entirety online. Butler followed the money, and the story he tells is dark. It's Kafkaesque. One of the most striking stories he tells is of the shoes. There were 4 million U.S. soldiers in World War I, but the federal government bought 35 million pairs of hobnail service shoes. Still, Butler tells us, there was lots of leather left. So they bought hundreds of thousands of saddles for the cavalry. But there was no U.S. cavalry overseas. It's Kafkaesque, except that it's also a century later routine. Great profits continue to accrue to what Butler called tongue planted firmly in cheek, patriotic industrialists and speculators. People making money off war. And a century later, the true cost of war is still painted over in a superficial patriotism. Butler's critique turns on the stratification of duty. He asks how many of these war millionaires shouldered a rifle, dug a trench, knew what it meant to go hungry in a rat-infested dugout, spent sleepless, frightened nights ducking shells and shrapnel and machine gun bullets. Butler's complaint isn't with the Marines, it's not with the military, it's not even with war on principle, it's with the racket. There are only two things we should fight for, he says. One is the defense of our homes, and the other is the Bill of Rights. War for any other reason is a racket. And it's a racket whose cost is too great. The general public shoulders the bill, he tells us, and it renders a horrible accounting. Newly placed gravestones, mangled bodies, shattered minds, broken hearts and homes, economic instability, depression, and all its attendant miseries. Back-breaking taxation for generations and generations. That's the true cost of war, he tells us. And he tells us, goes on to say, the soldier pays the biggest part of the bill. If you don't believe that, he says, then visit the American cemeteries on battlefields abroad. Visit any of the American veterans' hospitals in the United States. Visit and experience the lived realities of those who have served with honor, courage, and commitment, and without counting the cost, who remain always faithful to God, country, and corps, and especially to their fellow Marines, whose faithfulness finds embodiment and seeks expression and conversation, and ultimately some kind of cultural transformation. Visit them, he says. We'll look at two such Marines here and at the material through which their individual faithfulness finds expression. One of those materials is the challenge coin. These objects are held, they're carried, they're sometimes displayed. They're common street level manifestations of what I'm calling the core civil religion, and you've seen these three so far on the screen. The challenge coin is at its most mundane, a token of participation or affiliation. It has a varied history of many different origin stories. Most often, challenge coins are purchased or carried, traded by military service members themselves. They designate branches of service, tours, battles, battalions, individual values, aspects of identity. You can buy them at any PX or military supply store. On the screen here is a representative set. Commemorated are the Marine Corps' first birthday in Tun Tavern, as we've seen before the Revolution. Last year's birthday, the 244th. The Central Marine values of honor, courage, and commitment. Graduation from boot camp in San Diego at Camp Pendleton. And an example of the religious iconography that often appears on coins. This one quotes Ephesians 6:11, put on the whole armor of God. Gunnery Sergeant Nate Heilman, who served for 14 years, 2001 to 2014, has a large collection of coins. This is his collection, 40 or 50, mostly received from other people. Receiving a challenge coin, he says, is, quote, like receiving a personal medal. The reception often stems from a difficult or austere situation. They're a very personal way for someone to tell you that they're grateful, that your work is appreciated. The purpose of a coin, as Heilman expresses it, is to open a conversation. As a sculptor, once a grad student at Mass Art, practicing sculpture and holding showings at galleries and museums and in work in and around Boston, that's also what Heilman hopes his own work will do. And here are a few of his pieces, a couple of his pieces. These two, they integrate objects generally found in combat situations, objects which Heilman sees as, quote, carrying the weight for him. He works to present those objects in a way that is approachable. The older, more iconic grenade dwarfs the little green army men. Grenades don't look like this anymore, but it's the one we recognize as grenades. Millions and millions of these toys circulate in this country as children's toys. It's not a comfortable image, not at peace with its own contrasting forms. It hangs off the wall in a weird way, unsure of its place. And the other one, it's a military cot, which Heilman tells us is, quote, a sanctuary, one that in times of war is, quote, not really safe. Still, it carries with it a sense of safety, a precognitive association of respite, the illusion of privacy even. The barbed wire in which the frame is wrapped is a thing, quote, used in structures of control. Heilman tells us that it started as a way to control cattle, and now we use it to hold children in military encampments at the border. He says that he doesn't mind his work being taken in that direction, that these pieces are for him saying something about a subconscious awareness that comes with sleep, not about the awake consciousness when you can reason things away. And in that pre or other than rational consciousness of our settled selves, we can't avoid or wriggle out of the cognitive dissonance of juxtapositions like cots and barbed wire, toys and tools of death. The conversations we need are conversations that face that dissonance. And this, there's another one of the cots, just a little bit more aggressively uncomfortable. This second slide shows some of Heilman's earlier work. The medium in which the letters are stenciled here is human blood, his own and that of others who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. The stencils put some order back into the mess of destroying bodies, destroying minds and lives. It's a small thing, this order, and it doesn't redeem the loss, and Heilman doesn't pretend that it does. What he hopes is that his work, quote, creates catalysts for difficult conversations. With veterans, yes, but also with what he says are those usually marginalized from the conversations about warfare. This wish, this intent, Heilman shares with ceramicist Aaron Toole. Toole joined the Corps in 1989, served in the first Gulf War of 91, and left the Corps in 94. He now works as the managing mechanician at UC Berkeley's ceramic studio. That's his job. The cups that you see here are his vocation. Here, I happen to have one. I drink my coffee out of it. This is my cup. It's a picture of my dad, his boot camp picture. It's pretty nice. Grand scale memorials, Toole says, bronze statues and huge paintings and books, they all have cultural clout. They come with an expectation. Nobody expects anything from a cup. It's the humble stature that helps these cups to, as Heilman might put it, carry the weight that they do. These cups were recently fired. These two I gave to students, and that's their hands holding them. These two I broke. It was an accident. It happens. When a cup breaks, Toole says, "Man down." The cup's function for him is something like living metaphors for the people, the real lives, the real point. You can see that the images they bear are iconic images of both war and play. Like Heilman, Toole also works with the juxtaposition of toys and warfare, the texture at the bottom of every mug, including this one. Besides having a very practical function of balancing the cup, they're made from a mold of the sandbags that come with the little green army men. Toole shapes and decorates each cup by hand, many using his kick wheel, which as you see is named after Smedley Butler, as is his dog, Smedley. In grad school at Cal, Toole grew tired of what he called all the yippity-yap about art and communication, working instead from the knowledge that, as he puts it, peace is the only adequate war memorial. So he started making cups. He says, Saving Private Ryan came out, and people yapped about how realistic it is. You want a realistic war film? He asks. Introduce a character and shoot him. Then another. Then another. For 2 hours. A little piece of lead, that's it. The guy's gone forever. And what you see here is something of that sentiment. This is what Toole calls the 1.5-second war memorial. Each cup that is shot stands in for a person killed in the first Gulf War. Memorializing all the American soldiers who have died in the nation's war would mean watching this video on a loop for weeks. And of course, this memorialization, like all of them, is inadequate. Toole knows this. He says, "I don't think anything I do will change the world, but nothing in the world releases me from my obligation to try." The cups are the right scale, he says. They're to be used. He likes drinking out of them more than he likes looking at them on a pedestal, and he likes giving them away. Since he started making them in 2001, we've been at war. And he's given away over 22,000 cups. He wants the cups to be touchstones, what he calls a place to speak about unspeakable things. They go from hand to hand. Let's pause this. They go from hand to hand, which is a movement that Toole has rendered in his own Fired Clay challenge coin, which he was asked to make for a show in Arizona. The cups go hand to hand in the opportunities that they create for conversation about unanswerable grief, unspeakable loss, the cognitive dissonance of war in a world with children. That's their purpose. He tells the New York Times that the conversations his cups give rise to are a cooler way to travel through time than being in the permanent collection of the Smithsonian, which hundreds of them are. And that's a great honor, of course. Many artists strive for such an honor, and Toole isn't unappreciative exactly, though he does see the implications of being typecast as a veteran artist, a war artist. The New York Times published their piece on him not in the art section, but in the at war section, and that rankles. The pigeonholing of his work into a separate realm of consideration, that's something that Heilman resists as well. He says, "I would hate more than anything being pigeonholed as a veteran artist." And why might this be the case? Let's go back to the start. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. And what are Marines faithful to? Honor, courage, commitment, God, country, core, pride, honor, integrity. However it's expressed, that faithfulness adheres in a national veteran context persistently defined by PTSD, homelessness, and suicide. That faithfulness is maintained. It's embodied through popular arts like challenge coins and through the studio arts of veteran Marines. And in each of these cases, the goal is the same: to start a conversation, to open each of us to a recognition of our own shared cultural complicity, not in the interest of fomenting some ineffective, politically correct guilt, but in the interest of creating cultural change, what Heilman refers to as a shift in the culture, a shift in our consciousness. Toole would like to render visible something of what he calls the moral injury of war, the weird little breaks in reality brought on by the piles of lies on lies on lies. He'd like to point to those moments when military and civilian culture collude and collide. And he'd like us all to start being a little more honest with ourselves about that. If these folks are military artists, veteran artists, then the conversations they catalyze are marginal. The questions they pose aren't human questions, but questions for humans affected by or interested in war. To be marginal is to be at the edge, over there, not central, but it's also to be small, insignificant, unimportant. We're a nation at war, currently embroiled in the longest lasting campaign in our history. And as I've said numerous times, 42% of Americans don't know that. The true cost of war is a question that's central for all of us. And faithful to what? Semper Fidelis, faithful to what? That's a question easily asked of those whose banner declares an unending faith, right? But it's also a question for the rest of us, who have pledged allegiance to liberty and justice for all. Understanding what I've called the civil religion of the armed forces, and the Corps in particular, isn't only a way to understand our own complex, multivalent national history. It's also the smallest effort that we owe to those who aren't just pawns in some empire machine. 1% of the population increasingly separated from the civilian population, increasingly unknown, increasingly marginalized. It's not just that. They're not just that. They're also people who serve, and in serving cultivate an authentic commitment to what are ostensibly the highest ideals of our nation. So following their art can allow us to consider for our own selves our relationship to those highest ideals, and for our own citizenship, our relationship to a nation at large. It's a small thing. So I'll close here with Aaron's quote that, "I don't think anything I do will change the world, but nothing in the world releases me from my obligation to try."